Yes, I do have a brain tumor, and we'll talk about that later, but that is not the secret that I want to share with you today. So the secret is I actually talk to myself in the morning. Can I get a raise of hands? Anybody else talk to themselves, or am I the only one? I see some smiles and some hand waves. I talk to myself in the morning. And what I say, and I don't do it every morning, but most mornings, and what I say to myself is, Joy Mason, you are courageous, you are confident, loving, inspiring, persevering, because I don't give up, present minded, and optimistic. I have had this narrative that I say to myself since 2002. But back in 2002, when I created it, I'll be honest with you, I didn't believe it. I didn't feel it. But I was told if I set up my narrative that I own and a narrative that is empowering and uplifting me, that eventually I would believe it. So here's what I can tell you. It's 2021, and I believe every single word of it. And I feel all that. So my hope is that by me sharing my journey with you today, that you identify your narrative. What is your narrative that allows you to define your purpose on your terms? What is your narrative that allows you to reclaim your purpose and to feel all the joy you can stand? That's what I want for every woman that I come into contact with, and that's what I want for you. So let's get started here. So some of you hopefully will recognize this picture. Anyone know who this is? This is May Wright Sewell, right? We were just talking about Miss Sewell and her history with actually founding the Propylaeum. She started a girls' school here in Indianapolis. She founded the National Council of Women. And now I understand she also founded an International Council of Women, or she was one of the founders. This was one tough lady in the late 1800s. So let's just imagine that we are May Wright Sewell. And May Wright, let's assume that she talks to herself too. So if she's looking in the mirror and she is talking to herself and she has created her narrative, I actually studied her a little bit, and I was thinking, what would she say to herself? Just like I have my narrative. And I am imagining that she would say, May Wright Sewell, you are confident. You are bold, smart, and courageous. And I would imagine that was a narrative that she had to create for herself against a backdrop of very different expectations, where women were supposed to be quiet, subservient, obedient, right? Just do what you're told. So look at that. She created a narrative for herself, and she has a string of legacies that the New School, the Propylaeum, different women's organizations, and that legacy is alive today because she gave herself a new narrative. So again, that's something that I want you to remember and kind of tuck in the back of your head as I'm going through and sharing with you my journey. And that is the narrative that you tell yourself up, that you tell yourself against the backdrop of the narrative that you grew up with. And I think you'll see that theme kind of resonate as I share with you my story. Okay, I had to dig out some pictures of me way back when, and you can probably tell from the pants from the picture on the left. And I'm not sure how old I was, but I had to have been around 7 or 8 or so, but I am a native Hoosier. I grew up in the Butler, Tarkington area at 422 Berkeley. I still remember my old address. I don't think it'll ever leave me. And I was quiet, very shy, introverted. And back then, I just, you do what you're told. It's kind of different now where it's a back and forth conversation with your parents, and it's more about, questions, would you like to, and all that. And hey, I'm not judging you. I'm just saying back in my day, it was a little bit different where you did what you were told. I grew up with my mother, father, and my sister. My sister is 5 years younger than I am, so she's on the right. Her name is Sonia. And that was kind of my environment where we were two quiet little girls growing up in the Butler, Tarkington area. And I remember I went to ballet classes at the Jordan School of Art. Now, this is not me, but I couldn't find any pictures of me in my little leotard. So I found this one on the internet because I thought she was cute. So again, since I get to create my narrative, I'm going to create my narrative that I look like this cute girl. And so I was in ballet, and I regret that I quit. And the reason why I quit, I gave my mom one reason, and I told her that my stomach hurt. And that's why I didn't want to go back. I just didn't feel good. But the truth was, there was a male instructor, and I didn't have the words for it back then, but I have the words now as an adult. He was verbally abusive. And I do remember I had on a little undershirt. And I remember during a class, he grabbed my undershirt because it was kind of bulky. It was bulking up under my leotard, and he grabbed it and yelled at me and asked, "What is this?" But he yelled and demanded that I take my undershirt off. And again, I was very young. In my household, nobody yelled. So I was traumatized by having someone yell at me. And then after that, I didn't tell my mother. I don't know what it is about being young and being very afraid to tell the people who love you that, you know, another adult has been inappropriate or talked to you in an inappropriate way. But back then, I guess it's because you're supposed to respect authority. That is the narrative that we're grown up with. So I never told my parents, and unfortunately, I quit ballet. And every time I see Misty Copeland, I don't know if you guys know who she is, but she is just a talented, wonderful, beautiful Black ballerina. And every time I see her, I'm proud of her, but I do regret that I quit. But anyway, I went to the Jordan School of Art for ballet classes. I grew up, I was raised Catholic. I went to St. Thomas Aquinas at 46 in Illinois. And I was there for several years. My mother was an educator, teacher, principal, dean, everything that you can be in a school, she was, and ended her career as assistant superintendent of HR. And then my father, he was in banking. He was also an administrator for the IU Medical School, but he was very much in the community and was, during the civil rights movement, he was a leader in Indianapolis during that movement. He was also the leader of the NAACP chapter during the civil rights movement in the late 60s. And again, I share this with you because I think it's important for you to understand your own environment and how you grew up, because that's very relevant to the narrative that you grew up adopting. And it ends up being a narrative that as you get older, hopefully you'll get to the point where I did, where you kind of reevaluate that narrative and where it came from, because it may or may not be serving you. When I grew up, when I was very young, it was an interesting time. And again, this is important to understand your journey. When I grew up, like I said, my father was in the community, civil rights movement, and there were so many things that were happening when I was young that I was unaware of, but somehow it was in the atmosphere, it was being talked about, and I'm sure I was absorbing it. But there's so much I didn't understand about race until much later. So I just want to share with you some of the things that were going on during the time when I was really young, and it was in the environment just a couple of miles north of my grandmother's house off of Riverside. So at about 30th and Riverside. And I don't know if anybody is old enough to remember this, but there was a theme park at 30th and Riverside called the Riverside Theme Park. And it was segregated. And this is the point that I'm trying to get across. When I was young, segregation, you know, folks think it's so long ago, but for someone with my age, it wasn't. So this theme park was segregated, and I can even remember as we passed down 30th Street to get to my grandmother's house, seeing the roller coaster rise up way above the trees. But that was a theme park that my family couldn't go to. So while you have, you know, a community that can enjoy the theme park on the left, then I have my community, as you can see the picture on the right, and that's a picture of um, our community protesting outside the theme park because we couldn't get in. So eventually the theme park was segregated, and shortly after segregation, it closed. And that was kind of a theme with some um, um, businesses and institutions and places to go after segregation. There was the YMCA that my father and my grandfather were part of. And eventually I ended up on the board of the parent YMCA, but over on the left, in the top left-hand corner, you probably can't see in this little newsletter, but I have this from my father. My grandfather back in the 1930s was part of the YMCA, but it was a segregated one. So the YMCA that my families participated in, they were segregated. And I have to say, I'm very proud that just a couple of years ago, there's a new YMCA on the west side of town called the Ortho Indy YMCA. And I'm very proud that I was part of an initiative where we gave recognition to the Black YMCAs, the segregated Black YMCAs, on which the new YMCA on the west side, they owe their existence to that original YMCA. They stand on the shoulders of the segregated YMCA. So if you ever go over to that facility, you will see on the wall, and it's a very long wall. So this is just a part of it. It's a legacy wall. And I contributed pictures to the wall. So it's just a set of pictures and a timeline, again, to show that there was it was a special time for Blacks where we had a concentrated community, but it was a difficult time too when our community was segregated. So again, just giving you some context on what was going on in the environment and how my narrative was created. Just a couple miles from my house where I lived at 422 Berkeley in 1969, it was July of 1969, there was a march. And again, this is the picture of the march from a newspaper clipping of the Black community marching to the governor's mansion. And you can probably guess what the theme was. There was a lot of unrest regarding police shootings of unarmed Black men. This was 1969, again, when I was young and just didn't quite get everything that was going on. But look where we are today, you know, and we're still dealing with some of the same issues. But again, very, very interesting. And I'm glad I was able to find this clip. So again, I was very young back then. All these events were happening. I didn't realize that my dad was very instrumental in some of these protests and trying to change policies that was happening. But I just was unaware of what was going on until my parents divorced, and my mom's sister and I, we moved out to the Glendale area at 62nd and Allisonville Road. So we moved to the Williamsburg North apartments. And my mother worked. So we were, before we were latchkey, we went to a place called Ivywood, and it's no longer there. It's been torn down. And it was an aftercare place. And that's when I got my introduction into race. And I think I was about 10-ish then. And the teasing was pretty bad, to the point where the people who worked there, they had a pool and they separated us because the teasing was so bad. So I'm sure they called themselves protecting my sister and me. So there was the time in the pool for the white kids, and then there was time in the pool for my sister and me. So again, you could look at it and say they were just protecting us, but with my young eyes, I just saw it as white time in the pool and black time in the pool. There weren't any signs, but that's what it was, and that's what it looked like. And again, you would think, oh, this is so long ago. Well, it was in my lifetime. And in my lifetime where I can remember it. And I think probably with most Black people, you remember your first, right? You probably remember the first time you're called in the N word. You probably remember as a child the first time you're teased. Well, this was my first with this aftercare place. And what's interesting, here I am, way over 50. And when I go past 62nd Street, just down from Williamsburg North, and I see where Ivywood was, because it's no longer there, I think about that. So again, it wasn't so long ago, it was in my lifetime. And again, contributed to my narrative of how I saw myself. Because again, we're talking 1977, 1978. So it became part of my narrative. But I came from a family that was educated, was very focused on high achievement and going to school. They valued going to school. So I am so thankful that we had the means where I was able to go to Miami University, which was a public Ivy League in Oxford, Ohio. I got my degree, undergraduate degree in microbiology. I started working at Lilly. While at Lilly, I got my master's degree in pharmaceutical sciences. And then also while at Lilly, I got my certification as a Six Sigma Black Belt from Purdue. So, I know I had a narrative going on here that wasn't always positive. And again, I was naturally introverted and shy and reserved, and really just tried to make sure I did what was expected and had some perfectionist tendencies, but I was driven to achieve and make my family proud. So right after I graduated in May of 1989, 1989, I started working at Lilly, and I started in technical services. And that was in August of 89. And I was still, my narrative was quiet, shy, reserved, introverted. And sometimes in the Black community, you have this kind of in the backdrop of your mind that you just don't belong, okay? And it's gonna be an uphill battle to fit in, again, because of your past journey. And so that was kind of in the backdrop of my mind, even as I started Lilly. But very proud to be working for Lilly, because that's what the family wanted. Lilly was just the place to work. Everybody wanted to work at Lilly. So I was there and should be happy. But we'll talk about that journey at Lilly. Proud to be a Lilly legacy. So this is another reason to be very proud for getting my first job in technical services at Lilly. My grandfather worked there, but guess what? During a time when it was segregated. And again, you don't think about Lilly being segregated. I mean, especially in the current times, but it was like any other institution that was segregated during the 40s, 50s, and early 60s when my grandfather worked there. But this is a newspaper clipping, and you guys, this story is so cool. I was taking a tour through the new Lilly Museum, and actually my husband was on site for some community meeting. So we were walking through this little tour group together. I said, yeah, honey, I'll join you after work. I'll leave LTC South and I'll join you at Corporate Center. And we're walking through the museum, and I look and I was like, that's my grandfather. My family knew he was in the museum. And it's like, oh my goodness, this is awesome. But I knew that there was a newspaper clipping about my grandfather. And if any of you guys worked at Lilly, Again, I don't know if you go back far enough. So this shows you I'm no spring chicken. I go back a little ways when we still had the suggestion program, and that ended shortly after I started Lilly. But if you contributed or submitted a suggestion to improve something at Lilly, and that suggestion was adopted, then you got compensated for that suggestion. And back then, $500 was huge. And he took that, and some of that money he was able to use. Again, just $500, but they got a big house. They moved from California Street, which is in the Ransom um, Place area. They moved from there and moved to Roach Street and got a really big house. And again, when I go by that house off of Riverside, I really reminisce. But this article talks about him getting a $500, a substantial compensation for this suggestion that he had to be more efficient with. He worked in the area where they had animals. It's the tissue culture animals department, and the animals were always scattering their food. And so he had a suggestion where you could still feed the animals, but not so much food would be wasted. But anyway, in that bottom newspaper clipping, it's actually my grandfather, my mom, my uncle, and my grandmother. So what I'm trying to say is very proud to be a Lilly legacy, especially during a time where my grandfather couldn't finish Butler University because he didn't have enough money. Lilly was segregated, so his opportunities were limited there. And here, the opportunities appear to be much, much wider for me. And so that's kind of my Lilly legacy moment that I'm very proud of. I subsequently, when I started Lilly, went into technical services. And being a microbiologist, I had different roles and leadership roles over environmental monitoring labs, a microbiological testing lab. I think I was 26 or 27, and I had about 21 direct reports, and I did not know enough about how to be a good leader. So unfortunately, I made some mistakes, but I did some good things too. As a first-time leader. So being a microbiologist and being over microbiological testing lab, I'm used to sterile environments, gowning up, contamination and how it spreads. So as you can imagine, Joy Mason has been taking this pandemic seriously. I am all wrapped up when I go out, just because of my background. To make the long story short, I was there for 30 years. My last role was in a project management role for our global international labs. And I knew I wasn't going to be there for 30 years. And I'll tell you a little bit, beyond 30 years, and I'll tell you a little bit about why. I retired in 2017. So it's hard to believe that we'll be coming upon 4 years now. So I've been gone for a while. I am very thankful and grateful for the opportunity to work at Lilly. It's a great place, and the experience was wonderful. The skill set that I gained, I'm now able to use it with my own business. The pay was great. Back then, you had benefits and a pension. Pension is not common now, so I am thankful for that. But I struggled. I'm able to share this now, but I wouldn't dare share it while I was working there, because everyone's so thankful, or you're supposed to be thankful to work there. That's not something that you share with people that you're unhappy. And for most of my career, I was not happy. When I started Lilly, I was the second. And again, I know I don't seem very old, but I was the second Black person to be in an exempt, so a salaried position, supporting manufacturing in our Indianapolis plants. And the person who was the first, he tells the story today when he saw my face in the little newsletter. Back then they had a newsletter announcing new people. And when he saw my brown face, he was like, yes. Now there's another one. And again, I don't know if you know that feeling when you're the only one. And then to have someone else who looks like you to be there, it's probably like being a woman, you know, it's all men. And when you see another woman come into the department, you're like, yes. So he and I became good friends, and we were able to confide in each other about the challenges of being the only ones. But I have this slide up here to show you that I really felt and internalized a cultural mismatch. Back then, I didn't have words for it, right? I just knew I didn't feel comfortable and I was stressing. But now I can look back and say, well, it was because there were several mismatches. So in the manufacturing environment, and let me clarify, there were Blacks in manufacturing, but they were on the production line. They were in hourly positions. And then you have that dynamic, the dynamic between the salary people and then the folks who are hourly in the different cultures. But in the manufacturing environment, it was mostly white males, and again, the associates. Even the white males who were in associate positions had lower education. They just kind of grew up through the ranks. They were from rural towns, small towns around Indianapolis. And there was a sense of individualism. And I did not understand this individualism thing. I remember one day I was in my car headed to work listening to Rush Limbaugh. Don't judge me. But I'd like to diversify who I listened to. So I was listening to Rush Limbaugh, and he talked about this rugged individualism. And I thought, what is that? I have never heard that before. So that's something that's part of the culture. And, you know, I think it's important to know that not everybody, I know we're all in the US here, but we don't all come from that culture of individualism. And extroversion was valued. Me, here I was, Black, a woman. I have two college degrees. I came from the city. I came from an environment of collectivism. We were trying to move our community forward. And I was very introverted. But it contributed to my stress and frustration and just not always feeling like I fit in. And what's kind of sad to me is that my son today, my youngest son, he's reminded me a couple of times how I came home unhappy. And so I brought that home, but I just didn't have the awareness around what was happening to me and how it was impacting my household because of the stress that maybe some of these mismatches. And in addition, I saw what I believe to be some inequities around slow promotions, unequal opportunity, and it really impacted me. And then plus, I don't think I had the narrative that I needed to have to be as resilient as I wish I could have been then. But that was part of my experience. And now that I'm gone, I'm being more honest about that experience because I think it's important to be honest. And I found that the more transparent that I am, that frees other people, especially women and women of color, to be transparent about how they feel. So to try to speed this up, I went around my last 5 years at Lilly, I went through this little phase I call 20, 30, 50, where my kids and my two boys there, John Michael on the end, Miles, and then my husband on the left, they were in their 20s. And so they didn't need me like they used to. I was approaching 30 years. I was no spring chicken. So there were other women who were coming up. They were bold, smart, courageous. And I kind of still came up with an old narrative around do what you told, being a little bit more quiet and reserved. So I was kind of plateauing with my career and I was turning 50. So that was a little, it was unsettling for me. And where I was just trying to refigure out my life. And so I wrote and wrote and wrote about my feelings and what I was going through. And it was like peeling back an onion to try to rediscover who I was. Because if I'm not my work and I'm not the mommy anymore, who am I? And all that writing, you guys, turned into a book. That was not the plan. That was not the plan. But that's what happened. So when you read it, if you choose to buy it, you're really reading. It's kind of like my diary, where again, I did not read it and say, okay, someone may read this, so I kind of have to think about how I'm going to say it. It's just really me trying to figure my life out. And then later I wrote a journal. I think my publisher, Danola Burton, I think she's called in, and she's the publisher of my journal as well, because it really was about healing. Well, let me tell you something. God knows what he knew what he was doing with me. I think he knew that I needed to reassess my narrative and rediscover me, because I was going to need that when it was discovered that I had a brain tumor. And that was discovered because I had headaches that wouldn't go away. I had it day and night. It was constant for 3 weeks. Why I didn't go to the doctor, I don't know. But my husband convinced me to finally go. And from going to the doctor, they just thought I had migraines. They said, here, take this migraine medicine, go and get a CT scan and an MRI. And I got that. But before you know it, they thought maybe I might be having an aneurysm. I needed to go to the hospital as soon as possible. So that's what I did. They took more CT scans and MRIs and discovered that I had a brain tumor. So I did not know, and I was still in the middle of writing the book. So again, I wrote about what was going on with me, and I didn't know what all this meant. Brain tumor. I had two things going on: a cerebral spinal fluid leak, where the headache was actually caused by the fluid around your brain and spine. It's kind of a cushion, and that fluid was draining. So that issue had to be corrected because my brain was kind of throbbing and reacting to not having that spinal fluid cushion. And then because of that and doing the MRIs, that's how they found the tumor. So again, I wasn't sure what all this meant, but I saw a neurosurgeon, a neurologist, a neuro-ophthalmologist, anesthesiologist. We got the headaches taken care of by plugging the cerebral spinal fluid leak. And the doctor told me it had only a 30% chance of working. He doesn't know me. I told him I have activated my prayer warriors and I will be in the 30%. I was lying on the little bed and I told him I will be in that 30%. And I was. So it worked. And the tumor is still there. I will not die from it. The worst that could happen is it could cause blindness because it's kind of entangled in my optic nerve. So that's the issue. And if they were to remove it, because the tumor is so entangled in my optic nerves, they could cause me to go blind trying to remove it. So the decision has been, let's just watch it and we'll just monitor its growth. And so I go on a regular basis for MRIs and to get my eyes checked, because through some different exams, they will be able to tell if my eyes have changed, my vision, before I could tell. And so that's where it is. It's still there, but 2 years, or how many, I'm losing track of time, 2 or 3 years, what is my narrative that I've created for myself? Again, I look in the mirror and say, Joy Mason, you are courageous, confident, loving, inspiring, persevering, because I don't give up, present-minded, and optimistic. I had been working on my narrative, and my narrative prepared me for that moment, dealing with that tumor. I also had a friend, and she said, because I was fretting a little bit thinking about going blind, that wasn't a pleasant thought. And I had one friend that said, Joy, let's take the worst case scenario. You do go blind. She's like, your family's going to love you even more and treat you like a queen. She said, they're going to drive you anywhere you want to go, right? And all you have to do is just sit back. So I love this picture. I found this. And you just sit back in the car like a queen, and they will just drive. You say, I need to go here, and they will take you here. I need to go there, and they will take you there. She's like, Joy, just close your eyes and picture yourself. You would be a queen. It would be okay. And then also I told her, I said, but I love to read. I can't imagine, me not being able to read. She said, Joy, there's Audible. There's Audible now. You be able to read anything you want to read. And here's my point, and I know I need to close up soon. She gave me a new narrative. You've seen the power of words in a narrative. She gave me a new narrative. Her words were calming and healing. And I promise you, ever since she gave me that narrative, I'd be a queen and my family would take care of me. I have not worried, not one bit. And I know when I tell people I have a brain tumor where I could experience blindness, and I see their reaction because they have a different narrative going on. They don't know my narrative. I would be a queen and it would be okay. So let me tell you, things are going great with my new narrative. And again, I still got the little nugget in my head, it's still there, but I got a narrative that empowers me. I've got my book on Amazon, and the women that I talk to, I never imagined how empowering that it could be for women to read my truth, because there's a lot in the book that resonates with them when they read it. I've got my business, and that's in the opening, that a piece of the business or what the business is about was shared with you, and it's called Optimus Business Solutions. And I focus on process solutions for institutions when they're not getting the outcomes and outputs that they want. I've got a book, and again, a workbook. My publisher, Janella Burton, she is on the phone, and she helped me bring this workbook to fruition. And again, the power of words in the narrative. I didn't think I could put together a workbook. She's like, yes, you can, Joy. She gave me a template. And Danola, I think it was in 2 or 3 months. Even when I went out of the country, I was working that thing on the plane. I was working on it in the New York subway as we had our one-day layover. Every time I could, I was working on, and the power of her words, giving me a new narrative that I could create a business workbook, and I did it. I also coach women. I created Purpose, Power, and Joy. So I don't know if Aisha Cargill is here on the phone, but she helped me create a beautiful website and a logo. So now, me getting my purpose, power, and joy back and having a new narrative, I teach women how to do that. And I love it. I do, because there's nothing like seeing another woman get her power and her joy back that she never should have lost. You guys, I picked up a camera and taught myself how to, well, I did have a cousin help me, taught myself how to take nature photos. So I sell those on my website. This is one of my favorite. I picked up drawing again. So I haven't finished this little lady's hat. So maybe I'll finish it, maybe I won't. But in my spare time, I love to just paint and draw. So I picked that back up. You guys, again, still with that little nugget in my head, and my new narrative. My husband and I, we are traveling wherever we want to go. We went to Egypt, and that picture is taken in front of the pyramids at Giza. And the next stop, let me tell you, we are going to, our plan is to go back to Egypt, and then we want to go to Greece, Singapore, and Thailand. So that next time I talk to you, I will have those trips under my belt. Again, you guys, it's a new narrative, a new narrative. I do not have the narrative that I am shy. I don't tell myself that. I'm shy, that I'm reserved, I'm obedient, I do what's expected. No. It's Joy Mason. And yes, I do talk to myself. Joy Mason, you are confident, courageous, inspiring, present-minded, persevering, and optimistic. So that's what I want to leave with you, is a new narrative. If you feel like, again, I was in a place 20, 30, 50, the thing what was going on with my kids, my career, turning 50, all that together at the same time, reevaluating. Or maybe it's a health scare like I had, or just things are shifting in your life. Whatever it is that is not empowering you, a new narrative. And just take, so that's my call to action before I close out, because I want to make sure I leave a little time to ask questions. My call to action is examine your narrative and write it down on a piece of paper. And if there's any part of that narrative that is not inspiring you and empowering you, rewrite it. It's up to you, nobody else to rewrite it. Because I tell you, before God takes me out of here, I am leaving nothing on the table. I am using everything that God gave me. So that's how I'm going to go out. And I want you to, you know, when you leave this world, go out the same way where you are feeling all of your purpose. You are reclaiming all of your power and feeling all the joy you can stand. So just one more note before we end. May Wright Sewell, she created the National Council of Women, but again, the late 1800s, what was I talking about? It was segregated, right? The Black women weren't part of that. And that's something to keep in mind a lot of time when we talk about movements, suffrage movements, and what the women were doing in the 60s. A lot of times Black women aren't part of that. Not because we didn't want to be, we were excluded. So the National Council of Negro Women was founded by the woman with the hat there, and I don't know if you can tell, she's got a cane, Mary Bethune. And she saw the National Council of Women and was inspired by it and wanted something where Black women felt included. So she created the National Council of Negro Women much later in 1935. And actually, that was the first group that asked me to come be a keynote speaker, was the National Council of Negro Women. So you have a sister organization here in town with their Indianapolis chapter. And look, here we are, the members of the National Council of Negro Women. I am a member. And again, they asked me to speak and talk about my book. And I just want to share that you have this organization that is here in town. If you ever want to meet some of the women, I'll help you do that. But there's my mom right there with the little purple flower hat and some of the other women as part of the council. So I'll bring it to a close, but thank you for allowing me to share. And I do have my contact information. So if by chance you decide that you want to create a new narrative and you want an accountability partner, send me an email. So my email is there, joymason@optimustindy.com. And I would love to hear your new narrative. So thank you.
Joy, thank you so much. All of my questions are, I had a list of questions and you kind of just went through the list and answered them through your program. That's amazing. First of all, I just want to say, like, you embody your name more than any human being that I have ever met in my life. So yeah, you bring joy to everybody. And I hope you can see some of the comments on the side that people are saying. Just, I want to read this one. Oh my goodness, that they would add rock star to your list of, so thank you. You really do embody your narrative, but I think I would add rock star to your list. So I think I would too. So I have a couple of questions I wanted to ask. Do you have seminars planned already that people could sign up for? How can we attend? How can we see you speak again?
You know what? I do not have speaking events that are set up. It's usually organizations that come and ask me to speak. So again, with I don't know if we can do this list, just make sure that my contact information is distributed. And what I can do, I do have a speaker sheet of the different topics that I speak on, but also it's based on what the women want to hear. So I'll send that to you so you can distribute it.
Oh, that would be great. That would be great. A question, so in your workbook, does that help women develop their narrative? Would that help us create our own narrative? Like, kind of walk us through how to do that? Yeah.
Okay, so, and I'm glad you asked that question because there are a couple of things. With the purpose book, I'm actually walking you through my personal journey. So by reading about my personal journey, it does kind of give you a roadmap for refinding your purpose because you're watching how I did it. Now, actually walking women through creating a new narrative, I do individual coaching for that, where we're actually sitting down and we're walking through because you're telling yourself something. I mean, we all have a narrative. You just may not realize what you're telling yourself and what the self-talk is. So one of the first steps in the individual coaching is we're having a conversation and exposing and revealing what that narrative is. And I work with you on rewriting it. So that's on an individual basis with the coaching. which lasts 12 weeks. And we meet every week. And then with the workbook, though, that is business related. So with the workbook, that is 5 steps to sustainable solutions for women in business. So that relates to Optimus Business Solutions, where I help women when they're they're in a leadership role. They have challenges with not getting the desired solutions and outcomes with their business. So with my certification as a Six Sigma Black Belt, I use that technique and strategy in the workbook to help women walk through with their teams how to get more effective solutions.
Okay. Going back to Eli Lilly, I had a question. How long did it take you to realize that it was a cultural mismatch? Or did you, I know that you said that you felt that there was something wrong, or it felt uncomfortable the whole time you were there. How long did it take you to realize that's what it was? I mean, to put it into those words.
Not until towards the end, Liz, unfortunately. And again, this is a story that I think may help other women, because I don't know anybody's journey. I spent too much time thinking it was me and that something was wrong with me. And, you know, there are things that I need to change. Why can't I fit in? What's wrong with my personality? Maybe I'm not nice enough. I'm too introverted. People think I'm an angry Black woman, because I was told just by wearing a black suit, I was told that I was intimidating. So I was trying to change what I wore. I was trying to change how I look. I was trying to change how I talked, where after a while, I didn't know where joy was in all that. So it took, I can't tell you an exact time, but it took too long for me to finally say, while there's always opportunity for improvement and to be more effective at what I do, it's not me. So I hate to say it was towards the end of my career where I finally said, you know what, this is a culture thing, Joy. You've got to give yourself a new narrative. You are okay. And I don't know if I mentioned this, I meant to. I took a stress leave from Lilly. I didn't tell anybody. Mm-hmm. I mean, because you're supposed to be happy at Lilly. Everybody wants to be there. So how are you going to tell people, everybody who, you know, would want to be there working at Lilly, and they probably would want to be there and be unhappy too, just for the privilege of being there. Mm-hmm. And so I did not feel like I could tell anybody that I was stressed and very unhappy, and I was forced to see a therapist. It's like, if you're going to take a stress leave, you have to see a therapist, because right. I didn't want to. And seeing the therapist was very helpful, not to internalize so many things and think it was me. But again, this was probably after 20 some years in my career where I had a narrative where I thought something, if I could change, something was wrong with me. Mm-hmm.
That just hits so close to home, honestly. I don't think that I can't imagine there's a woman on here that didn't think at one time in the company of men, what am I doing wrong? It must be me. Right. That's, right. Yeah. Stephanie Johnson had a question, and she said, I connect with your story on many levels, but it is hard for me to promote myself. How would you be able to help me with that?
Well, you can tell from what I've been talking about is to start here with looking in the mirror and first feeling very empowered. And now I want to clarify, because I've been reading some things about imposter syndrome, where there's some controversy about imposter syndrome, because some people think that means you're putting everything out. You know, you're not looking at an environment that needs to change and be more equitable for women and for minority women. But there is always inner work that needs to be done. So first, I think it's very important, because there's too many women that I talk to, and I can tell right away there's some imposter syndrome going on. You've internalized negative messages. You don't speak up enough and feel your value. So you can only start, the only person you can change is you. So the women that I work with, we've got to see our own value and start with your own self-talk. And then once you feel that value, you embrace the value and you start speaking it, then you manifest it. Then your voice starts to come. I don't even think I had voice. And I thought it was maybe due to introversion, but again, part of it was my narrative. So how I work with women is that empowerment, self-talk piece, getting our voice back. Then you've got the confidence to ask, what do I need to do, to get that promotion? What does it look like? Ask your boss, you force him or her to describe to you, what does that next level look like? And then you have to have the courage to speak as if you will walk away. But that takes a lot of internal work to say, hey, I've done the market research. I've done the market analysis. I've done the comparison. I've looked at the technical ladder and what it takes to get promoted. So I have laid out the case and I need to understand what's not happening here. But I didn't even have the voice and the courage to articulate myself in that way because I was too busy focused on what's wrong with me. So,
yeah, it's amazing. I honestly, what an amazing story. What you are we really are so inspirational. And
thank you.
And that's the least of your story. That's
well, yeah, that's just but I do want to say I saw that there was a question regarding how to get the book, how to access my coaching programs. Again, my books are on Amazon, and I think we can make sure that links go out after the meeting. And then regarding my coaching programs, if you go to the Purpose, Power, and Joy website, and that's what it is, purposepowerandjoy.com, you'll see some different coaching options listed. I think it's the second and third from the bottom, the Empowered Leader and Purposeful Woman. The empowered leader is more if you're in a leadership role. So you've got some different dynamics going on regarding you stepping into your leadership. Because I work with a lot of women, they're in leadership roles, but because of how women are socialized and we're worried about the relationships and we're just worried about things that men don't worry about. Plus we got to deal with the men. So with the Empowered Leader, it's for women who are in leadership positions currently, or they're emerging leaders. And so I work with them on the dynamics that are occurring because of their leadership role. And then there is the Purposeful Woman, which is more about you're just going through some transitions like I was, maybe the 20, 30, 50, and trying to peel back the onion on what life is not. I think we accumulate so much junk. And again, it's that those junk words that kind of attach themselves to us over our years of growing up. And so I work with women very similar to my book, trying to help peel off those, those ugly onion layers, because we don't want to create a new narrative on top of the stuff that needs to be washed away. And so when you go to my website, if you just click on the button that says book an appointment, and then that way, we can get 30 minutes together and kind of figure out what's going on so we can get something tailored that works for you.
Yeah, we will be sure and send out an email to everybody that registered for this program with all of your information in it, your contact information, and a link to your website, as well as a link to purchase your book. Again, Joy, thank you so much. Amazing, just amazing. Thank you. I think we can all agree you did a great job. Thank you.